I am Emily Weiler with the Montana Public Health Training Center. We are excited today for this motivational interviewing training with Julie Benson.
And so I just have in the opening slide, just telling you what we're talking about, which you already know. And I'm Julie Benson, and I hate saying retired, but it's the truth, but it ages me. I'm a retired communication professor, and I also have a consulting business where I teach a lot of these subjects, not only in an academic setting for years, but have done this in the workplace. And I have done a ton of work for public health in the past. So I'm passionate about doing these topics that are related to public health. So I'll just say that for now. I may say a little more in my intro when we do intros for everyone. So I'm going to go to the next slide and just welcome you all to showing up. So what I'd like to do, since we have a small group, for introductions, and I would do this even if we had 20 people, it would just take a little longer. But if you could tell us who you are and what your role is that you're doing MI skills for, where you're from. And if you don't want to use your microphone, you can certainly introduce yourself in the chat. Since we have a small group, I'd like it to be interactive. I've never been told I'm not approachable to have a casual conversation with, but if you don't want to have your face up, and that's okay, just use the microphone and introduce yourself in the chat, please. Or go ahead and unmute your mic and tell me who you are. You're not.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Yeah, Stephanie, you were muted.
I was trying to unmute. I'm like, why won't it mute? By the way, this is Jaylee. We're in the same office.
Okay. Jaylee, will you, it'll probably show in a moment, but will you tell me how you spell your name, please? It makes me, we got so used to Zoom, and then now we've been able to do things live. And I feel like if everybody can be patient with each other, we're out of practice. It happens. You know what? I'm okay with being out of practice with Zoom, just because everybody has been Zoomed out.
So ask Jaylee the question again, Julie.
The question was, since I don't have her as a separate name that comes up, could you tell me how you spell your first name, Jaylee?
She is a separate name.
I'm up there. Yeah.
Well, I can't see it at the moment. So would you tell me?
It's Jaylea.
Okay. After having taught for 30 plus years, I never assume anybody spells their name a certain way. So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And could the two of you introduce to me in terms of what we have up on the slide about who you are, what your role is here, that you're coming to learn MI skills, and where you are?
Okay. I'm Jaylee, and I am in Richland County at the Public Health Department. I'm the Drug-Free Communities Coordinator, so I interact a lot with all different members of the community and lead a coalition. So this hopefully will help me in my coalition meetings and gaining new members.
I think you're absolutely right about that. And does any part of your job include, this might be a silly question, but I don't want to assume, is that in terms of trying to get people to change their behaviors?
Yes, it does.
Okay, well then you are signed up for the right workshop. Okay, thanks so much. Stephanie, you want to tell me a little bit about you?
Hi, Stephanie Reynolds. I am the Communities in Action with our Richland County Health Department. I'm in charge of that program. And then also we have an AmeriCorps program, and I'm in charge of that, placing AmeriCorps members in health departments across the state.
Okay.
And a lot of this is, we're working with different sites in different counties across the state, but we're also bringing in AmeriCorps members. So we're meeting with a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different interests. And so being able to find common ground with all of those different personalities is why I'm here.
Great.
Awesome.
One of the great things about motivational interviewing skills, it sounds like from first glance, it seems like it's very specific to like providers and clients or whatever your population is, but the skills are so transferable to so many things. And we're going to do some examples about that. Some in the clinical setting, I say clinical, but it might be something different, but whatever your setting is. And then also how that translates into having conversations with colleagues and friends and family members. And if you've ever had a crazy conversation about COVID with somebody, I'm sure you haven't at all, that was disagreeable or anything, then, you know, these are ways to work in those side of those conversations also. So thank you for sharing that info.
And
Okay.
Julie, we have a new join. So just to say that Tiffany Weber, we're
Okay.
just doing introductions. And so if you can see the screen, we just want to know who you are, what your role is, and where you're located.
Hi, Tiffany.
And Dina used the chat.
Hi, I am so sorry for being late. I got caught up on a call and couldn't get off. I'm the director at Ravalli County Public Health. And what else did you want to know? My name's Tiffany Weber.
What your role is, I guess.
No, go ahead.
I'm the director of public health.
And did you say Valley County or Ravalli?
Ravalli County.
I just wanted to make sure it kind of cut off, and you don't have to apologize for being late.
I am
I
so
had a
sorry.
Well, I had a tech problem right from the get-go, and I was like, oh, we have a
Okay.
small group, we'll be fine. And so only 2 people have introduced themselves before you. So no big deal. You've really missed no content, and you'll be
Okay.
able to learn the other folks' names as well. And then Dina, you said, is using the chat. Okay.
Yeah, and she's
help me
from.
out?
She's from. Now this is funny. I'm a bad Montanan because I don't know how to. Is it Macomb County or Macomb? Is it Macomb? I think I've always said Macomb. But she
Macomb.
works for Macomb County Public Health.
Okay.
So she put that in the chat. Macomb, no Y sound. Thank you. I feel bad.
That's
I've
funny.
learned. And then we just got, it looks like she's not attached to audio yet, but we have Angelina who just joined as well.
Perfect.
So if she pops on, great.
Dina, I don't know if you get this even though I am a native Montana, and I know, just having worked with public health a lot, almost all counties, but when I first started doing work in public health, I made the huge mistake, especially since there was someone in the audience who was from there, by calling Marr County Meager County.
No!
That is how it is spelled, I am telling you.
Yeah, that
And
was classic.
That is a classic one. And
Yeah,
I
well,
feel bad.
And in Missoula, we now have the Thomas Marr Bar. And when that went up, everyone was like, who's Thomas Meager? And we're like, no, no.
That's great. Okay. So Tiffany, you said that you're with Ravalli County Public Health. And what I've been asking people as we are going through here, you may have said, are you the director there? I missed writing it down.
Yes.
Okay. And so your interest in MI skills, is it for a particular population or a behavioral change, or what are you focused on mostly in this role?
Well, I'm rather new to being in a leadership role.
Okay.
I was the epi nurse before, and then during the pandemic, I got moved up through a series of battlefield promotions.
Yes.
And I think for me, what made me sign up for the course was vaccine hesitancy is a real issue. I don't even know if it's hesitancy in our community. It's just plain old flat out misinformation, disinformation, anti-vax.
Yep.
And
Flat out refusals. I got you.
Yep. So I was interested in it for that particular reason.
Well, that's very good news. There's a spot a little later in the presentation when we are going to discuss very specifically vaccine hesitancy, because that's part of it, but I'm using other fields to show how transferable it is. And then we're doing a follow-up that second week in June, I think, Emily, somewhere around there, and it's going to be very COVID specific. So if this interests you at all, you may, and you'll get a chance to practice that here too as well. Okay, so Angelina, I think, is with us now. Yes?
Yes, I'm here.
And can you see the slide on intros? Tell me who you are, what your role is, kind of what your interest is in MI, and where you are.
Yes. So I'm Angelina Swick. Right now, I am working as an AmeriCorps member in youth outreach for the Richland County Public Health Department.
Nice.
Most of my interests, so I've taken some MI classes. I have a master's degree in social work, so we did a lot of that kind of training and preparation for doing social work. Right now, I'm primarily working with the youth population, but I have experience and interest in working with adults who have disability populations,
Okay.
child protection services, all kinds of stuff like that. So anytime I have a chance to update my MI skills, refresh my memory, I find it to be particularly useful for all the work that I do. So
That's very descriptive and very helpful. And yes, one of the fields that MI is used a lot in is counseling. And we'll use a couple of examples throughout today that'll talk about how it's there, but you'll hear how the questions and the process works, how it fits to other fields. And so some of it will be a refresher for you. And if some of you have not taken anything on motivational interview, please don't have anxiety about that, because this is designed where you either maybe have a little info or maybe you don't have any, because I have found that not in only taking MI courses, but in teaching them, this is not something you get into your practice after one course. It is really always refining those skills. So we'll be looking for examples if you have them, and we're all going to learn from each other. So great. I feel like I have one more person, Emily, that I don't see, but is maybe in the chat.
Dina is in the chat, and I did just text or just message and said if she could tell us her main interest in motivational interviewing.
Oh, right. We just got the McCone part and then we didn't get to hear the details. Okay.
So feel free to give us some more info, Dina, if you'd like. And then we all get quiet and hope she's typing.
I'm guessing she's typing.
I'm just wanting to gain knowledge. It never hurts to try to better yourself, right? Totally, completely. And I definitely agree, because with motivational interviewing, I feel like I certainly can use it in my job, but I also, every time I take a course like this, I go home and use it with my family and my friends and people I meet, you know, and it's really good skills, especially when you run into people with very different backgrounds doing different stuff. So it's applicable everywhere. So.
And I'll talk about a couple of other examples where you're really trying to get somebody to make a behavioral change. If any of you happen to be parents, or perhaps you have elderly parents. What if you have a parent who needs to make a change from their living situation because of their health and they really don't want to do it? There are all kinds of ways to use this in your personal life, because the skills are communication skills. And that's been my life for 34 years, is working in a variety of communication contexts. So for those of you who joined us a little bit late, just mentioned that my intro is that I have a background in academia. I taught communication courses all through my life, everything from conflict management to the basic communication course, PR, you name it. And then along that, I had a parallel track of developing this consulting business. And now that I'm no longer teaching in the classroom, unless somebody tries to get me in for a guest lecture, which is all I'm willing to do at this point, is I do the consulting work in anything from nonprofit organizations. I love doing things for public health. I'm so passionate about everybody's causes. And then I do stuff for corporate offices as well. So that's a little bit about my background. So that is our introductions. And did we leave anybody out, Emily? Are we good?
We are good.
Okay, I'm going to advance to the next slide then, which tells you our agenda today. And this is more of like an outline rather than objectives, which I'll have in a moment. But of course, we will start with defining what it is. And I've included more than one definition today because it comes from different fields, and some highlight different words that are really important to me that could be the takeaways for people. Then we'll talk about what's called the MI spirit, which is how you come into the approach of using these skills, and how that approach, you may have some of it now. It may be very foreign. Maybe you do it all, but you could refine it. Then we'll talk about the 4 pillars of that spirit. And then I have some acronyms, and I am, as a trained communication person, you usually say everything first and then put the acronym, but I'm going to do that when we get there because I didn't want to clog up this slide. If you've taken anything on MI before, you've probably heard ORS for sure, maybe EPE, and ORS stands for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. And EPE stands for elicit, provide, and elicit, which is a little more advanced tool. And then I have some other tools, which some are strategies, and mostly they boil down to approaches and very specific communication skills. I put practice there. We're not going to do all that and then practice. We're going to have opportunities to practice throughout. And it's not like you're going to be put on the spot in some weird way. I'll often just give an example of something, and then we may take somebody's scenario and we can help co-create something for that person to say instead. It's never putting you on the spot, and you always have the right to pass. And the idea is for you to take home some things that will actually be useful to you. Then at the very end, we'll summarize a couple of the things we've done, and then Emily will have an evaluation link for you when we're completed, and put that there for you so you can talk about what worked well in this presentation and what you might have liked differently. And I'm going to invite you from the very beginning to be very candid about that, because if we're going to do more of these, the only way to make them better is to know what really worked for you and resonated and what really didn't. And no feelings, I got tough skin. I've been doing this a long time and much rather know what to improve than not. Okay, so learning objectives for today. When you leave this, you should be able to, in a short version, be able to explain what motivational interviewing is. It doesn't mean you have to memorize all those definitions, but that you could tell another person. That you could identify the 4 pillars of the MI spirit, that you could, given a situation, assess the different strategies toolbox that you have and choose one or more to use in conversations that require change. Again, the ORS, the EPE, listening, and other skills. And you're going to hear me talk about listening a lot. People talk about interviewing skills like you're the talker and asking all these questions. Well, you are doing some question asking, but it's really about hearing what the answers are and doing something with that. So we'll practice techniques in actual scenarios. That's one of the things you'll be able to do, is to practice them. Have a number of ways to do that based on ways adult learners learn. Some will be watching some video clips. Some will be some script that Emily and I have to practice for you. And some will be, we have a small group, but I think we have enough to divide us into 2 groups at times where you can be in a breakout room and do some practicing that you can be very collaborative with. It's not about passing a test, but working with each other and giving each other ideas. And then at the bottom, I put something that I find is very important with any communication skills, whether I'm teaching public speaking and the techniques for that. But there are techniques for MI skills, and then there's your personality and your style. And it's hard to remember all of MI, and nobody does all of MI perfectly. Even if you learned 1 or 2 strategies and you mix it in with who you are and how you talk. We're not asking you to change everything about who you are, but that you take your own unique style of using motivational interviewing skills into both your professional and possibly your personal lives. I'm going to pause there for a moment. And, well, actually, I'm going to move to the next slide, but we're still going to pause because I have some questions to ask you. So in the chat for this one, if you could type in, when you hear the phrase motivational interviewing skills, what does that mean to you? And I don't mean define it, some big fancy thing, just what's it mean to you? What do you think of when you hear it? What's the first one that you see? Difficult conversations? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I can see from there. I see difficult conversations. Oh, yes. And in fact, the one I'm going to do for Susan Reeser at the immunization program in June is specifically COVID and COVID vaccine hesitancy. And we were talking about, it's not just about the vaccine, but having those hard conversations. I see encouraging change, growth, getting information that might otherwise be difficult without the skills. That's right. And one says, I tend to think of meeting clients where they are, spot on. client-led, spot on, goal-oriented. I view it as a tool I can utilize to embody these terms into my practice.
There was
So
also,
that's what I,
there was also meaningful conversation.
yeah, and I can't see that on mine. I'm not sure why.
That's
I'm gonna, okay, so what else did I leave out? Meaningful conversation.
Yep, that was it.
That's it. Okay. Well, you're all right on the money. And even if you weren't, it wouldn't matter because sometimes it has to do with what you've heard about it. And that helps me know where you are. I didn't hear anybody say that you might have hesitancy about learning these skills. And so I'm going to give you a comparison, and then I'm going to use that as an analogy later as we're trying to work with other people. When Susan Reeser, and some of you may know her, but she works in the immunization program for the state health department. When we were first putting together our COVID vaccine hesitancy training with MI skills, a lot of people had some resistance about that. Like, I haven't got time to do that in my job. You know, if they don't want the vaccine, I'm not going to do it. Or they argue, and you know, it's very normal. Or and I'm going to again use the specific COVID situation, like, I'm just over it. I don't want to talk about it. People are always trying to bait me into a terrible conversation. And my job is just to give the shots. So I want to ask if you feel any hesitancy about learning these skills. And you may not, but I'm going to ask that anyway, because it would be normal. And you can just unmute or chat, whatever works for you.
Hi, Tiffany. I don't feel any hesitancy about learning the skills. I do find that in my county, we're very choice oriented. I want to respect people's choices, you know, but I also feel like I want to be able to express myself and explain why. I just want them to have all the information.
Right.
If they're going to make a choice, I want them to have all the information. And I feel like misinformation is huge.
Oh, yes.
And so I want to be able to, if I can have the conversation with somebody where I can determine what misinformation they have and why they feel that way, then I might be able to explain, you know, the other piece of it. So I don't find that I'm hesitant to learn the skills. I find that I'm more hesitant that, like, I'm not interested in making anybody do anything they don't want to do. I just want to make sure they have the right stuff.
How many of you have ever tried to change a person? Even if we wanted to, we can't. And so we can't make people do things they don't want to unless, you know, I mean, if you're a parent, you can say, yeah, you will give me your car keys if you ever do that again. I mean, you can do that, but that generally doesn't create any willingness to want to do that more. It's just, that's how you get obedience out of somebody. You know, so we are looking at different approaches. Any other hesitancy? Maybe similar to?
I don't think it's hesitancy. I think it's just making sure that, you know, conversation is a two-way thing. And while I want to understand where they're coming from, I also want to understand where I'm coming from and not necessarily change, but understand. And that I want to also be the willing person to understand as well. I don't want to assume as I step into a conversation that I'm the all-knowing. I want to try and understand, but asking the right questions to get to that understanding is kind of my goal.
And that's great, because the understanding piece is so important. And what all of you have been mentioning a little bit is, you know, kind of working with somebody. And that feeds right into the spirit, which we're going to get to in some of the details of the actual skills and terminology. But it's important to understand that you know, we want people to have the correct information, especially about COVID. You know, that's a real obvious one, but that's true in substance abuse or trying to get somebody to make a behavioral change in their family. That's really necessary if they have a lot of anger management problems and they need to learn how to fix that. And, you know, things like that, you want to go along because we have a tendency to go, we've got all the right information. And if any of you have ever been offered unsolicited advice from someone, think about how you feel when that happens. You're like, hey, I didn't ask. So unless people are directly asking you, people don't appreciate being told what they should know. And it comes, even if you have all the good intentions in the world, gosh knows, I've been doing that with COVID work in the last couple of years a lot. So thank you for sharing those. And if any others come up, please feel free to share them. Okay, so defining motivational interviewing skills. I'm going to go through a couple. This is the classic one because Milner and Rolnick are the original creators of this set of skills. So I'm using the most recent version from their book in 2013. It's more of an academic description, as you can see, because it's long, but it has some good words in there. And then I have a couple of others. So a collaborative, goal-oriented method of communication with particular attention to the language of change. It is designed to strengthen an individual's motivation for and movement toward a specific goal by eliciting and exploring a person's own arguments for change. And so you're going to hear some other words like intrinsic, that it lies within the other person, and how you draw that out. And somebody said, meet them where they are. That's exactly what we're talking about here. And so you see words you're going to see again, and we'll revisit some of those terms there a little later. Okay. Then I put in two other definitions here, and I have several people I will give credit to. This comes from, well, I have his name on the next slide, but I stole these two from somebody who works in vocational rehab, helping people who've either lost jobs, quit jobs, and may or may not be all that interested in finding a new one yet. And that was one field that when I listened to his issues, he faces some of the same things. There's this ambivalence about doing this. So MI is a well-supported approach for engaging clients in making positive changes in their lives. And when I hear well-supported, the other things that I found in a million other definitions that we all know in public health realm is it's very, very evidence-based. And so these strategies just didn't come out of nowhere. And then the third one I include, because it has some other terms, a client-centered guiding, I like the word guiding, method of communication and counseling to elicit and strengthen intrinsic motivation for change by exploring and resolving ambivalence. And in another slide, we're going to define some terms that we've been talking about. Not that you don't know what the words mean, but how we're using them in this context. And I think the part about, it says counseling, one of the things I want to be careful to say is that MI is not psychotherapy. There are people who are psychotherapists who use these skills, certainly. And we have one example with a clinician who's working with someone who is depressed and certainly addresses those kinds of skills and uses them, but the skill itself is not psychotherapy. And if anybody's ever tried to psychotherapy you probably don't appreciate it. So that's not the goal either. And some other fields it's used, and I put at the end just to name a few. I mentioned counseling, substance abuse, smoking cessation, improved nutrition, increased exercise, job placement, vaccine hesitancy. And you know, COVID isn't the first one. It just has been the most heated one that I've ever known in my lifetime. But I used to argue with people about getting their flu vaccines. I'm like, okay, whatever, you know. And then interpersonal relationships, which I've mentioned a couple of times. So here's some terminology I'd like to talk about in terms of what these things mean. And so when you hear the word ambivalence, who can tell me what comes to mind when you think about what Paul Warren, that's the guy I was trying to cite before. He's from the New York State Psychiatric Institute. So what's ambivalence mean to you? Someone want to offer up just a casual definition?
I would offer one up, but I just can't really.
You would if you could, but right now you can't. I love that.
Can't be bothered.
Okay, anybody else?
So to me, I kind of think of like uncertainty or hesitance, like maybe some roadblocks on the way. There might, I don't know, I think of like a spectrum because a person might have like some desire to make a change or some desire to go in a certain direction, but there might be some roadblocks. So
there's usually a but to that. And so the way he defines it is that it's holding two viewpoints, and then I put at least, because you could have three. And I'll give an example about a behavior. So let's say it's the job seeker example, and someone is a fairly young person, and I'm going to say in their 20s, But if it's later 20s, especially, I'm going to give this example of someone who has not found a job and is back at home living with their parents. Okay. And so they have the viewpoint of, I don't really want to get a job right now. And I don't really want my parents to kick me out, which they've threatened to do if I don't get a job. So that seems like two opposing forces. However, I threw a third one in there, which, because there could be a lot of things, is that maybe they don't feel confident in finding one. And so having used, if you uncover that, you can work with the confidence part as opposed to trying to tell them, you know, you really need to get a job, not just because you should have a job, but you'll enjoy the freedom and the money and you won't get, you can go get your own place. You can tell them all those reasons and they might even know them. But if they're having ambivalence, probably not going to work so well. So there's at least two competing viewpoints and they feel them at the same time. And I said at least because I already threw an example in with third. Now, change talk, also defined, is any speech that favors movement in the direction of change. So you have to listen for those little morsels and nuggets when they're talking. And I put it could be verbal or nonverbal, because if you're interacting with someone face to face, their words may say one thing, but if their nonverbal is different, we all know that we're going to believe the nonverbal over the verbal. And those are often big cues about, it might be their tone of voice, it might be the way they're sitting, it might be their facial expressions. So I'm going to add on to that definition too, and just say any speech that favors movement in the direction of change, and it's linked to a particular change goal. And so, you know, let's take a parenting example. Perhaps as a parent, this is how I was, and people may have different approaches. I understood that when my kids are in their 20s now, but when they were in high school, I knew that they were probably going to drink with their friends. Okay. So instead of trying to absolutely stop that behavior, my request was, if you do that, you need to stay put where you are or make sure you get a ride and don't get in a vehicle. Not just you, but with anybody who might be, you might not be driving, but someone else is. And I had to work with trying to get through that change. And I tried to meet them where they are, which wasn't I telling you, you will never do this, because that doesn't even, the harder you squeeze as a parent, the more everybody backs off. So that was my approach and it worked fairly well, but it didn't work really well until they got to college. So that's just an example. So that's verbal and nonverbal things about change talk. And that the thing up there about role change, I just loved the example that he gave. And I loved his metaphor because it's real similar to one I use when I teach conflict management skills, is that you ever had a conflict with somebody where it's kind of like same crap, different day, and you go through the same argument over and over again? And I have a book called The Dance of Anger, and how if you're doing the same dance with somebody every single time, all you have to do is change one step and they will be required to change a step as well. There's no way they can't. They'll resist you and they'll step on your feet, if we're using the dancing, to make you not change, even if you're doing a positive behavior. Like if you're from a family of yellers, if you decide to get real calm instead of yelling, they will not like that. They will resist that, but they're going to have to make a change. So the reason I mentioned that is the metaphor that Paul used was, I want you to think about a wrestling or a boxing match. Is that how it sometimes feels if you're talking to somebody about COVID? How it feels sometimes when you're trying to get someone to stop smoking and they know that it's bad for them and you don't understand why, all these different things. And it feels like a boxing match or a wrestling match, and it's push-pull. And sometimes when we come at people, instead of, even if we have great intentions and we really care about the other person, again, the harder you push, the more people put up literally or metaphorically their fists and back into the corner, whether it's the boxing ring or in a wrestling match. So he used the metaphor of changing from a wrestling, and there's something called the righting reflex, where someone says that inaccurate information and you want to just tell them, well, that's wrong. And, you know, it'll shut people down, even though you are probably right. It's just that it's careful. So the idea is to do a dance with the person, and his is a little bit different, not so much the changing the steps, but that you're doing this together, your partners in these conversations. Okay, so I put some common scenarios, which I've already mentioned many, so I'm not going to go through every single one except ones I haven't mentioned yet. I have found from some providers that they really struggle with people doing their diabetes care. The self and or relational improvement. What if you're trying to do self-improvement? You know, you're trying to improve your health. I put political conversations. We've sort of talked that. We've mostly said that's COVID, but there are plenty of other political conversations that are difficult for people to have. And then I also put supervision of an employee, because a lot of people come real heavy-handed when they're supervising or they have no hands on. And there is a way to do that as partners and move along. Have I left anything out that would be of interest to you when I put others there? Think of something, throw it up in the chat or just unmute. So this is one I want you to type into the chat or just unmute if it's really great to share. We've got a small group. So I did this in the COVID one. So I'm going to give the COVID example and then you can maybe do it in your field. And if that's a COVID example, fine, but you all have some different backgrounds. So let's see, I think it was it Jaylee? That you talked about having to help people make behavioral changes? Did I say?
Yeah, for youth, I guess, is the behavior changes. Youth
And
think
what would be an example of one of the behaviors you might be trying to change?
like underage substance use. So you think that everyone is doing it when really they aren't. So they're even more hesitant because they think not doing it isn't the cool thing.
Okay, so maybe keep that in mind while I give this example, and then anybody else in your fields also. But so my question is, what is either the weirdest, and see, we can say this because our populations aren't with us, or the most outlandish thing you've ever heard in your field about why they don't want to do what it is that's good for them? And the example I'm going to give when I taught the COVID specific MI skills training was that someone said, well, I'm not getting the vaccine because I know someone who got it and they are now magnetic. I'm sure you've heard even maybe more outlandish, but that was one that really, like, no pun intended, but stuck with me. It's magnetic. And I will never forget that. And so I want to know, either type it into the chat or you can unmute and say, what's the most outlandish reason you ever heard for their ambivalence or hesitancy to make that behavioral change?
I can go. When I was working in Wyoming, I worked for this program called Youth Diversion. And so I worked a lot in like a mentorship position. So MI was something that we did a lot. And we always had to explore like youth's ambivalence. I had one young girl that I was working with in particular. And we were trying to work with her on, she had a little bit of suicidality, and most of it was stemming from like alcohol use and a couple of other things like that. So we talked to her a little bit about her hesitance, and she explained to us that she didn't want to quit drinking or some of her other behaviors because she felt like it would make her boring.
Oh, okay. That is a very unique one. Anybody else?
We've had a lot of people not want to get vaccine, the COVID vaccine, because of a couple different things, but mostly that it's going to change their DNA. You know, if you're a pregnant woman, or it might make you infertile. There's nanobots that Bill Gates put in there, and it's used to track us.
Yeah, that's the one I heard also, is that the government's putting a chip in us. That's what we're doing.
There's a chip. I just told him it's in the flu shot.
I love that answer. Any others that you recall as being particularly, we're going to say nutty for now, because we won't approach it that way. But when you're sitting hearing it, you're thinking, you're just doing the, as my 20 somethings would say, SMH, shaking my head, you know?
We also had people who didn't want to get swabbed for COVID because they were certain that the COVID was actually on the swabs, and that's how I was infecting them.
I see. Oh, we put COVID into them. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, if anybody else, here's some things that we heard in general categories. Mistrust. And that's kind of what you're talking about, that government stuff. I mean, really here in Montana, I'd be shocked if you had something different, but you probably heard at least some. You said that now it's not just, if we're talking about COVID, is that it's now not just, nobody, even people who used to listen to who the CDC was, don't even want to hear a CDC citation because they mistrust all of government. And I see some nods about that as well. But there's mistrust in the healthcare for people of color. And legitimately so. They have had some bad experiences, and there's some historical trauma through there. So, some of these reasons are legitimate. But one of the things you hear a lot of is just this whole conspiracy theory for whatever it is. They're just trying to make me do this, whatever. And so, like you said, I think in your county is that people, it's not even that they have hesitancy. They're just flat out, not doing it, angry, do all that. So information that you don't know about. So of course, depending on, okay, and this could be, let's say it's about smoking cessation and you heard a myth about it, or that this kind of medication works, or trying this works. And you as a provider, no, that's really not how it works. Substance abuse, you talked about that example of teenagers thinking everyone's doing this. And you're like, no, really, there's information out there that shows that not everyone is doing that. So then there's the inaccurate information. We could go down quite a rabbit trail with that one. Fear, just in general, about any kind of change. We all have fear of change. There isn't a single human being that is not afraid of change or uncomfortable with it. Some of us roll with it better than others, but if we certainly have got, in many surveys we've done, the vaccination specific. Before COVID, it was, I'm not getting the flu shot because it gives you the flu. And I would always, again, shaking my head, thinking that's not how it works. I'd love to explain it to you, but I'm wasting my breath. Misunderstanding of information and anecdotal evidence. So I was at my health club not too long ago, and somebody was sitting in the hot tub talking to a friend, and she said, well, I'm not getting that vaccination because I heard that it did. And I can't even remember it because I felt like my jaw was still on the floor going, yeah, one scenario. So I've kind of asked you what else you hear for hesitancy. We've been using some COVID examples, but I want to know if there's anything else. You talked about that it'll make me boring. Anything else we're missing for why people just flat out want to refuse certain behavioral changes? Okay, we're going to keep moving along then so that we get some practice time in here shortly. So the MI Spirit has 4 pillars, and I'm using Justin Clark's example, but the 4 are all the same in other textbooks about it and articles. And he is from the counseling world. And so he has an MSW. Some mentioned that one of you, I think, one of you mentioned having counseling background. And so you use these skills. So autonomy, collaboration, evocation, and compassion. So autonomy is a couple of terms that I just want to associate with that. Acceptance and giving them choice, that we have empathy for them and that the choice is truly theirs. And it takes some of the heat off of you of having, if they make the choice you were not aiming for, it is not on you. And if you get a flat out hard no, even after you've worked collaboratively, you don't have to take that on either. They are going to do what they are going to do. And we'll see some examples where if you take away somebody's choice, they're going to fight hard to make sure. And everybody says, oh, Montanans don't want to be told what to do. Find me any state where people want to be told what to do. I mean, but yeah, Montanans may be a little of that on steroids, but I also think there are a lot of other frontier states that are like that as well. Collaboration, this is the side-by-side, that you are a partnership. And here's the key, the way Justin describes it, is that instead of thinking you're the expert and they don't know, you are both experts. You might be an expert on the content, but they are an expert on who they are. And if you uncover that and their motivations, you can work collaboratively. Evocation is trying to draw out information that they have intrinsically inside themselves, and the belief that they truly have the abilities, capabilities, and they even have motivation for change. But if we don't draw it out, they won't uncover it either. But that they are just as capable, maybe more, of figuring out solutions and actions that work for them to get them to a similar place that you're hoping for, but it's within them and you are a guiding partner. And then truly having compassion. Now, does compassion mean you need to agree with them? Nope. Does compassion mean you need to agree with their choice? Nope. It just means, again, along the lines of empathy and having accurate empathy. So empathy isn't feeling sorry for someone. It's trying to put yourself in their shoes and trying to see where they're coming from. And you may like it or not, but it's really not for you to decide. And sometimes we think we understand it. So some of the questions we use in the ORS principles is to say something after you've maybe possibly considered something they're understanding. You might say, did I get that right? Did I capture what you said? And that way they can correct you. All right, so we're going to do some examples here coming up. And so ORS, I mentioned, we're going to do the definitions, and then I'll give you an example, and hopefully you guys can come up with some practice. So open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summary items. And again, this is from Miller and Rolnick, and it's in everything that's discussed in MI. So you can see the ORS in the bolded letters along the way. So we're going to do some examples. Open-ended questions. I threw a few out there that just came off the top of my head. I'm also a mediator, so when I'm interviewing parties, I have to ask open-ended questions. Closed-ended questions don't work very well. So how can I help you with, okay, you can fill in the blank. So it might be, how can I help you find a job when you're ready? Or help me understand, and you might have somebody else and filling in the blank in your field. Here's one that I grabbed from somebody who was working with somebody who just really didn't understand their risk factors for like feet and wound care about diabetes, and they were just not taking care of themselves in all the ways they should. And so instead of saying, you do know that you're at risk of losing limbs or whatever, instead of saying something like that, that's judgmental and arrogant, what risk factors are you familiar with regarding your diabetes? And then you let them tell them. And in the next ones, I'm going to follow up with how I might go from there. I might try to elicit some information and say, and ask for their permission. Would you be okay if I tell you about some of the other risk factors about diabetes, in addition to the ones you already know? And if they say yes, they've given you permission. If they say no, you might try one more go around, but it's also okay to say, thank you. I appreciate the boundary, because you're fighting, again, you start back in the push-pull. When might you be most likely to, what have you tried before? So in the what have you tried before, that came from somebody who was working with, wasn't so much an addict, but definitely was an over drinker, and then had gone through a really good phase where they were not having drinking be their major coping mechanism. And they kind of regressed. And instead of saying, well, why'd you regress? You take them to a time where, so in the times when you weren't over drinking, what did you try? How did you keep yourself from over drinking? And then they can tell you, you get a place from a positive, and they can start internalizing the idea of, I did those things to come over that barrier. Maybe I could try that now. So let's, can someone, so we've got some different fields here. Somebody give me an example of an open-ended question you might try.
I took some coaching classes, and one of my favorites, when you get to a point where you're just not making any progress, you ask them, okay, if I were in your situation, what advice would you give me?
Oh, I like that one.
And then it kind of flips it on its head and be like, they have to think about it in a different light. We're
All the
always
rest
better
you
at
can
giving advice to other people than ourselves.
Oh, of course. And
So
you know,
they had
that
to flip
flipping,
it.
the
Yeah,
flipping is great.
yeah. That was always one of my favorites.
So anybody else participating might want to steal that one if you haven't used it already. In my mediation notebook, I have all these that every time I teach the class, I have pages of open-ended questions that other people have used that I steal. So this is one of those things we steal. That's a good one to steal. Anybody else want to offer an example of an open-ended question in your field? Okay, if you come up with something when we get to the smaller groups, then we'll.
I was just gonna say one more thing, Julie,
Please.
something,
Please.
for the open-ended questions, something else that they said in coaching is, and I appreciate your list because nowhere does it say why. And they said, when you're trying to do that, you try and avoid why because it
Yes.
sounds more accusatory than
Absolutely.
solution oriented. So avoiding the why question is usually best because that avoids the, trying to get defensive.
Correct. And I will caveat that with, there are occasionally times you can use a why question that doesn't sound accusatory. So, but I usually try to change it to a how. So in my field of mediation, when I'm using MI skills, somebody will be demanding an apology from their spouse or their ex-spouse or a coworker. And sometimes I will say, so if you were to get an apology, how would that help you? Or you might say, why is an apology important to you? As long as, again, you got the nonverbal going on, you're not trying to say, why do you need one? You're saying, why is that important? But I try to flip it if I remember, but in conversation, it's hard to remember, how is that important for you? How would that change this situation if you were to get an apology? So yes, you're right, staying away from the whys if possible. And how that is delivered. Okay, affirmations. This is when we have the chance to notice their strengths. So this was from somebody who had a lot of parking issues. And then in Montana, you can think about how sometimes transportation to somewhere far away, or they just don't have transportation. So you're right, transportation is difficult. I appreciate your patience and perseverance in meeting with me. So you're acknowledging that given a barrier, they're showing up anyway. With everything you have going on, you're handling this situation really well. That's a good suggestion. Clearly, you're a resourceful person. So you're affirming who they are and that they've got strengths. Anybody have an example they'd like to share that would work for you in your field?
In the chat box, I'm currently in an open office environment. So I'll be communicating over chat. So we have a new person that joined, just so you know.
Oh, who is it?
And I'm completely spacing on the first name. It's C. Perry. Carmen, I think.
Carmen?
Yep, Carmen. Okay, cool. I had a
Well, welcome, Carmen. I'm Julie. Thanks for joining us.
We've
Okay.
also gained Brandy Williams as well. So
nice. All
so
right.
as we're doing this, feel free to definitely use the chat box. I'll be keeping an eye on it too. So
okay. Then the next part in ORS is reflections. And they can be very simple, where you are just stating back what you heard. And the examples I gave us, the internet has a lot of information out there. It can be really confusing. They may say, there's so much out there, I don't know what to follow. It changes every day. So you just reflect what they've told you. At this point, someone in the job seeking area said, I am going to collect my disability checks till the day I die. Now, to take the sting out of that, you're going to do this till you die. Here's a reflection. At this point, sounds like you're going to collect disability checks for as long as possible. And you're saying it back so they can hear it. And it also shows you're listening. Here's a different one. Sounds like you're upset that you were doing so well. And that could have been, I stopped smoking for a while and I'm back in it. I had been going to psychotherapy for my depression or taking meds, and then I stopped taking them. And then I put your examples. Here are some starts that let you know you're doing a reflection. Sounds like you're wondering if getting a part-time job might work for you. If I'm hearing you correctly, you are upset that you're still living at home with your parents. So an example, anybody want to share or create? Okay, well, feel free to add anything as we're going along. And summaries. Summary sounds like it has to come at the end of the conversation, which it can, but it can come at any point in the conversation. So this is a kind of a progressive one. Sounds like you take pride in providing. So I did the ORs mostly from the workplace, the vocational rehab counselor. Sounds like you take pride in providing for your family. Not working has been hard on you. There's your ambivalence, especially the impact on your spouse. And then maybe they respond to that. And then maybe you, here's one that has to do with why they weren't working. They said they had some poor health. Your health has improved. So you've come in to see if working might be right for you and that it might reduce the household stress. And whatever you summarize for them, this is when you can put in a close-end question and say, finish with a close-end question. Did I leave anything out? Did I understand you correctly? So summaries are just really they're reflections, but you put more of what you heard and then you give them the opportunity to say, did I get that right? And if you didn't, they'll tell you. And then you have accurate ways to understand their viewpoint. Okay. And you'll get a chance to practice it. So overall, MI is a 3-step process. You're assessing their disposition, or we could call that their viewpoint, or their whatever their ambivalence is. Where are they right now? And then it's using MI skills to talk, and I put and listen. I put patience, but it could be population, it could be friends, family, and then to make a plan. And we'll talk more about that if they actually agree to a plan, you can get the details there. The other plan might be as simple as saying, is it okay if I check on you in a couple of weeks? It might be that you're going to do some follow-up. So Emily, this is our first video. And what I want folks to do is to listen to this video and see what you might notice of the ORs. And really, I'm going to be asking you what works well and what do you think the provider could do better?
Okay.
So Emily, are you able to pull that one up okay?
I'm going to boot you.
And remind me if this is our counseling one or our COVID one first.
I believe this is the depression one.
Yeah. Okay. So this is, we're going to play about a little over 5 minutes or so. So if you can just listen.
How are you doing today? It's good to see you.
I'm just tired.
Just tired.
Yeah.
You know, we did some pre-visit planning with you, and your PHQ-2, which is a short depression screen, was actually positive. So we asked the nurse to give you a little longer screening tool, which is a PHQ-9, and that actually did come up with a score of 8, which is in the mild depression range. So how does that feel?
Well, I knew I felt different. I didn't know I was depressed.
But you knew something was wrong.
I didn't feel like myself. I haven't been feeling like myself, no.
Tell me a little bit more about not feeling like yourself.
Well, I just go to work and I come home and I sleep. I wake up in the morning and I'm still tired. I just have no energy.
So you sleep a lot, but even though you're sleeping, you don't wake up rested.
No, not at all.
Doesn't sound like good quality sleep.
No. I just have no energy. I don't want to do anything but just sleep.
How long has that been going on?
I guess a couple months.
2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
What else is going on, Alvina?
Well, I've been drinking more. I mean, I drink socially, but I find myself that when I come home, I have a glass of wine and then I just go to sleep.
And that's worrisome to you.
It is, because I don't usually drink that often during the week. So it's increased. Yeah.
I can see where that would be bothersome to you. What else is going on with you?
Well, my mom died a year ago, so Mother's Day's coming up. So, I've been thinking about Mom a lot. I miss her a lot.
That anniversary is close.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
particularly hard when those anniversaries come around for the passings of our parents, that's a very difficult time.
Yeah. And I took care of mom. So that's hard because for a long time, well, she was sick and she died from cancer. So I took care of her. So for a long time, that's all I did was take care of mom and work. That was, so now that she's gone, it just kind of brings up everything all over again.
It's kind of a hole in your life.
Yeah, we were really close.
Well, I'm really sorry for your loss, and thank you for sharing that with me. I know that's very difficult. So it sounds like your sleep has really been affected. You're not getting good quality sleep. You're really fatigued.
Yeah.
Just kind of going through the motions, it sounds like, during the day. And then, how's your appetite been?
I'm not really eating that much, you know, because I don't have energy. You know, before I would come home and cook dinner or, you know, meet some friends after work, but I don't want to do that. I just come home and have a glass of wine and just go to bed.
So you used to be more socially involved than you are now,
Yeah, I don't do anything now.
a little more isolated.
Yeah, just work and come home and sleep.
So if there was something that you could do about this, what do you think you might like to do?
Well, I don't want to stay like this. This isn't who I am, you know, just sleeping all the time. It's just, I don't want to stay this way.
Kind of feels like you're stuck at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. I just don't want to do anything or go out with my friends anymore and just work and come home and sleep. I don't want to do that.
It's kind of the same old routine. I wonder if it would be okay if we could talk about some of the options that are out there for folks that have some mild depression
Okay.
like you. Would that be all right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, we typically think about medication as a possible answer.
Mm.
So, no medication
I don't
at
want to
this
do
point.
medication. No.
All right. Then I think as important, certainly, perhaps more important than medication, is counseling and getting you to talk with someone about your feelings on a regular basis and getting some feedback on that.
I'm okay with that. You know, when mom was sick, you know, she was in hospice care, so she had cancer. And the nurses and the doctors, you know, had our family talk to someone, you know, about what we were feeling, you know,
And
when
so
we
that
had
was
to
a
face
pretty good
reality.
experience. Then?
Yeah. Yeah. To talk to someone that understood what we were going through.
Sure. Something else might be
Is that a good place to stop, Julie?
Yes, it is. It's perfect.
You'll have to reshare your screen.
Oh, okay. Now let's hope I don't have the same problem I had before. You can't see my screen right now?
Nope, you're not sharing it.
All right. Working on it. Can you still see me?
Yeah, I can see everyone in the room.
Okay, so for right now, I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna gotta minimize my screen. Something is going. I've had trouble with this today and I'm not sure why. Because it's,
Do you need me to punt you to the waiting room again?
why don't you do that and then yeah, just do that because I'd rather just shortest distance between 2 points.
That works. Okay, you're no longer co-host. Back to the rating room with you. Okay. We'll let her back in.
Okay, now I can share it. For some reason, that's working just fine. I really don't know I do not know what's going on there, but
If it works,
I'd like to hear, can you all see my screen and me now? Yeah, I'll have to figure that glitch out later. So let me ask you, in hearing that conversation from the providers, looking at the provider, what did he do well?
He listened.
He listened. Okay, what else?
Kept the questions, kept the conversation kind of flowing, but without dominating the conversation.
Correct. And allowed her to answer in the way that she would want to. I didn't see her getting defensive. How about how he handled the, no, I don't want to do medication? Because I'll bet some of you have heard that before. People's knee-jerk reaction is, nope, no, no, no medication. Unless they're from a family or have education that says, you know, this being on medication isn't a bad thing. How do you think he handled that?
Again, I thought that he handled it well and that he just flowed right into the next piece of, this is the other option that I would suggest if you don't want to do that. It
Right.
might be a topic we revisit later.
Absolutely. And he introduces talk therapy and she says, yeah, that worked for me when I lost my mom. And so he's going with her experiences that she's comfortable with that. So start her there. Who knows if when she's doing therapy, somehow she might bring it up and say, you know, I had a physician suggest I might try some medication. What do you think about that? Might ask the provider of the therapist. And you may get there in the long run, but going, oh, well, you absolutely need to be on medication. It would help you so much. What's the response going to be if you do the writing reflex?
I think that if it were me, I would already be going, and I'm not coming back to see you.
That is exactly, and we're gonna have another example of that coming up, is you all of a sudden mistrust the provider for not even listening to what your hesitation is. That's a really good point. What do you think the provider could have done better in this short scenario? I mean, it took 5 minutes to do that, and I feel like we learned a lot about her situation. So sometimes it can only be 5 minutes, but he could improve. What could he do?
I can't put my finger on what annoyed me, but there was something about it that I was like, oh, I don't know, what was it? I'm open. Tell me.
Anybody else get a little bit of annoyance?
Yeah. I
Okay.
was annoyed just because it felt like it was going so slowly. And that might have just been how they filmed it. But it's one thing to ask these great questions, but there was all this downtime. And to me, it almost felt a little bit like he was talking to a child just because it was really slow and we weren't really getting anywhere. I would have been frustrated as that patient just because I don't like wasting my time.
Yeah, that's true. Anybody else have a reason for feeling annoyed? That's not on the slowness category. Okay, so there is the chance that that would not work for you. Sometimes going slower and pausing lets the person really process what you're asking. It may be that you're a quick processor and quick to speak up, but if a patient doesn't seem to be, we don't know. So that could have been a plus or a minus given that person's scenario, and we don't know. So I think that that's a possibility also. I'm somebody who likes to have things move along, but I also like to be heard. So she might have felt very heard. I'm not sure whether that's a plus or a minus, but it just tells you that we all have different responses to different kinds of questions. And that's really the morsel to take away from it. And the more you know about the person, the more you might decide to go slower or faster. And if you picked up on that the person seemed like they were feeling like they were being treated like a child, you might have to watch your nonverbal or pick up the pace, something like that.
Well, and that reminds me actually a little bit. It's sort of like when I used to go in for doctor's visits and it was like a new doctor that was switching out and they'd ask me like, how scientific are you? Like in a better way, but just be like, what is your job? I'd be like, I'm a chemist. They're like, okay, you're a scientist. And they learned pretty quickly that I responded really well to all the technical information. So I wanted to know what was going on and I wanted super tech info. Like I understood it. I understood biology and it helped. She knew immediately how to speak to me about it and what I appreciated and what I took in easier. And so that's happened, I think, with most every doctor I've had, which has been really helpful and lucky. that they've kind of done that work and then they speak to me in a different way.
That is lucky, because I've also had people who are switching from a new provider who asks me questions so quickly that I feel like they're not listening to the answer at all. And we're going to see that here come in this script coming up. So communication skills, we've been talking about these so far. Before I show you, we do another scenario, is listening more than talking. We ask them the questions, but we want to have the provider or the population person talking more than we are. Empathy, doesn't have to be agreement or sympathy. A lot of this is review, but empowering the other person, refraining from judgment. And I'll tell you, that's super hard. Believe me, the things I think in my head sometimes when I was taking calls, answering for the state health department and helping diffuse people, especially at the very beginning of the pandemic, getting really angry people on the phone. And me just, luckily my conflict skills training taught me how to not take that personally, but to try to not have it. This person is not mad at me personally. They are mad, but it's not, and I want to think all these terrible things about how smart or not so smart they are, to refrain from as much as you can. Also, to keep in mind that this is practice and not perfection. Maybe you try one new strategy. Pick and choose the pieces that work for you, not taking their refusal personally. And that's really hard, especially if we quote unquote know we are right. And I'll talk about some tips in a little bit about how to not take that personally. I also put silence there, which maybe that provider was using. I know as a teacher, and even as I've posed questions to you, I have no hurry about having you answer. And as a young teacher, I had someone say, remember, be comfortable with silence, because it's okay for someone who especially is an internal processor and has to think about it. There might not be silence, but silence is a nice tool too, to let somebody think about it and sink in. I'm going to throw a couple of other questions out there, hypothetical questions. And Stephanie, I think you gave the flip it on their head example. If you were me, what advice would you give me? So I'm going to throw in a couple of examples. Here's one. If you were fully vaccinated, how would that affect visiting your mom? Okay. Assuming that we'd already heard the change talk of, my mom got vaccinated and I'm cool with that, but I don't think I need to do it. And they had mentioned being able to visit their mom. Or you might ask the opposite. If you don't get vaccinated, how would that affect visiting your mom? So it's hypothetical, okay? Focusing on strengths questions. I've mentioned this before. Think of a time when you weren't over drinking. What did you do then to overcome your barriers? I love the magic wand questions. I do this in all kinds of trainings or facilitation. What if you woke up tomorrow and had a job you really like? What would that look like for you and your family? Scaling questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for you to eat better? Oh, I put find work is what I started to put, and then I changed it to eat better. So eat better. Okay. And if they say a 3, instead of going, why only a 3, you might say on the positive spin, what puts you at a 3 and not a 0? So, I mean, you didn't say 0, because a lot of people would say, why only a 3 on a 10? Then you got all this judgment and you got a why question. What if someone says a 6 and you say, so what would it take to move you from a 6 to an 8? And some of their answers might be, well, if I get my anxiety medication refilled, maybe I won't be so nervous. Maybe if I get a little more flexibility in my schedule, I would be able to find time to shop more healthy. Who knows what the answers might be. So here's the script part. And Emily, I need to unshare now. Correct?
Yep, you should be able to click that. There
Okay,
should be a stop
yeah,
sharing button.
in just a moment. So let me set you up. We're going to do 2 scripts. They're short, but they are of the same situation. This is with a provider and a brand new diagnosed HIV positive patient. We're going to do the first script, but I don't want you to see it. I want you to just listen. Emily is going to be the patient. I'm going to be the provider. And then I'll pull up the script. So hopefully I won't have this trouble since I'm not going to a video of the sharing and not sharing. So I'm going to put stop share. And then Emily, tell me if I got that covered.
Mhm.
Okay, so are you ready to do this with me, Emily?
Mhm.
Okay, so everybody just listen to this very short conversation. Again, I'm the provider. Emily is the newly diagnosed HIV positive patient. Wow, I didn't expect to see you today. I heard you missed the doctor appointment I set up for you last week.
Yes, well, sort of, I guess.
You do know you just found out you're HIV positive. You have to see a doctor.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
You need to get some, I mean, basically, you need to get some baseline blood work done. And we have no idea what's going on with your HIV.
I know. It's not that easy to make it happen right now. Besides, I feel fine. I mean, I'm okay. I'm not sick or anything.
You don't have to make it happen. I made the appointment for you. All you got to do is show up.
Scene.
Okay, we're going to do it without the words since that one's short, and then we'll go to script 2 and I'll come back and you may have to do what you did before. So let me just ask you, from what you heard with Emily and me without looking at the words.
There.
Oh,
Fine.
okay. So here it is. Wow, I didn't, well, let's do it again real quick, Emily. Wow, I didn't expect to see you today. I heard you missed the doctor appointment I set up for you last week.
Well, sort of. Yeah, I guess.
You do know you just found out you're HIV positive. You have to see a doctor.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
I mean, you need to get some baseline blood work done. We have no idea what's going on with your HIV.
I know. It's not that easy, though, to make it happen. Besides, I feel fine. I mean, I'm okay. I'm not sick or anything.
You don't have to make it happen. I made the appointment for you. All you got to do is show up. So that said, let me ask you, what's
So
problematic with this?
we have a comment of providers started almost every statement with you, statement, placing blame on them for the situation.
Okay, what else?
The client mentions that it's not that simple, which would have been a really good opportunity to kind of find out what barriers there might be that are keeping them from being able to go. They're not taking any time to expand and find out why.
Not at all. I mean, have I asked a single question? I'm looking at the words, none of them have a question. Okay, what else is problematic? Let's talk about my nonverbal.
Pretty short and curt.
And I thought awfully judgy. I was trying to be really judgy. You don't have to make it happen. What else is wrong with that last statement? What has it taken away from the patient?
It's taken away any sense of like accomplishment or that, and honestly it's taken away a little bit of control from the person too. It's not very client centered. It's not giving them any power over their own advocacy. And
I've taken away all their choice.
And in the chat, they said empowerment as well.
Yes, I've taken away them to be empowered, you know, and of course, as providers, you might be able to understand when someone doesn't show up for an appointment, but we need to know why this person, I mean, somebody's newly diagnosed with HIV, I bet they're having some serious ambivalence and emotions and things, and this provider is not taking that into account at all. Okay, so what's the best way for us to do this now to just, if I open my PowerPoint, I'm not sharing right now, right?
No, you're not sharing.
Okay, so let's do this. We're going to do the second one. And Emily and I are going to play the same roles using MI, at least a little bit. So I want you to notice what you see. And it doesn't mean we're doing it perfectly, but this is just how we're doing it. She's still the patient. I'm still the provider. Hey, Emily, great to see you. Thanks for coming in today. Come on in and take a seat. Here, let me pause a moment and turn on the ringer on my phone so we won't be interrupted. How are you doing today?
Pretty okay, I guess.
I could be wrong, but you seem maybe a little nervous.
Yeah, I never made it.
You never made it?
Yeah, I didn't make it to the doctor's appointment. I don't like doctors. They don't treat people with respect. They're always answering their phone or typing what I say into a computer. It's like I'm not even there and they're not even looking at me or listening.
You had a bad experience with the doctor.
Yeah, and she used a lot of words I didn't understand. I felt stupid.
That sounds frustrating and uncomfortable. Seems like from what you're describing, it would be normal to have those feelings.
I didn't even feel like I could ask questions about the things I didn't understand. Then she would have known I didn't understand what she was talking about. Maybe she could have gotten somewhere, but not when I feel like an idiot.
Even though you felt that way, you did show up for this appointment. That shows that you have strengths and are committed to your health. Would it be okay if I tell you about some of the doctors I work with in our program?
I'll take my Oscar now.
Yes. Okay, now I want to go back to screen sharing and you may need to kick me out. Okay, thank you. So here it is, and if you'll move it forward when it's time. So, hey, Emily, great to see you. Thanks for coming in today. Come on in and take a seat. Here, let me pause a moment and turn down the ringer on my phone so we won't be interrupted. How are you doing today?
Pretty okay, I guess.
Could be wrong, but you seem a little nervous.
Yeah, I never made it.
You never made it?
Yeah, I didn't make it to the doctor's appointment. I don't like doctors. They don't treat people with respect. They're always on their phone. They're typing and looking into a computer. It's like I'm not even there and they're not even looking at me or listening.
You had a bad experience with the doctor.
Yeah, and she used a lot of words I didn't understand. I felt stupid.
That sounds frustrating and uncomfortable. Seems like from what you're describing, it would be normal to have those feelings.
I didn't even feel like I could ask questions about the things I didn't understand. Then she would have known I didn't understand what she was talking about. Maybe we could have gotten somewhere, but not when I feel like an idiot.
Well, even though you felt that way, you did show up for this appointment. And that shows you have the strength, that you have strength and are committed to your health. Would it be okay if I tell you about some of the doctors I work with in our program? All right, can you see both now? Me, oh, well.
Yep.
Okay, so before we go back, let's stay there. Tell me what you saw that was different in this presentation of script. And I'm not saying it's perfect, it's just different.
So Carmen
What did you-
said, words demonstrating respect for visit, asked open-ended questions, affirmed the patient's feelings.
Okay, what else did you see or hear?
I like that encouragement. That shows that you have strength and are committed to your health. It really kind of encourages her to keep moving forward.
Because honestly, that's true. If you've ever had one of those experiences where the doctor's typing in the whole time, it doesn't mean they're not listening, but it can be so unaffirming. And saying you have strength is one of the O's in A for affirmation. So I've done open-ended questions. I've done some affirmations. Did you hear any reflections?
If I understand that correctly, is that where they're like, you feel like that would be normal to have those feelings?
Yes. So that's what you would call a more complex reflection. One is you had a bad experience with a doctor. I'm just describing what they've told me. I've kind of, but then saying, seems like from what you're describing, seems like, sounds like it would be normal. So I'm guessing at the feeling. And that earlier, I also guessed that you seemed uneasy. You have to be careful about guessing those. You don't want to psychoanalyze them, but it's okay to reflect back what you're seeing and hearing. Okay. So did I do any summaries? I don't think that I did, but it's a pretty early start in the conversation. Okay, so you could see some of those things at play. So now I have just up a visual, which is that process. It's just a reminder, you're looking at their viewpoint. Some people accept right away. And if that's the case and it's some kind of care, you just link them up with care as fast as you can. Some people will accept but have some questions. We saw that with the gal that was depressed. She was open. She had some questions about some things and she was hesitant, certainly refusing medication, but not too hesitant to try psychotherapy. So this is the process. I liked this visual as kind of a review in between all of this. We may skip this depending on how much time we have or only show a little bit. So I may come back to this because I want to mention another tool and talk about hesitancy a little bit. Now, at the beginning of this, most of you said you didn't have hesitancy about learning this, but I'm going to share an example. When I first was doing this for the immunization program, and we were talking specifically only about the field of COVID vaccinations. And it was pretty early on in the game. And it wasn't just the flat out refusals. It was, you had some hesitancy. And so we offered this training, and some of the people who signed up wanted to sign up, but they also had their resistance. And I wrote down a couple. So let me just throw out a pretend scenario. Let's rewind a year till when vaccines were new for COVID and when they first came out. And if I said, okay, I'm going to give you let's say it was your supervisor. I'm going to show you a presentation on MI skills by the immunization department. And starting tomorrow, you will use all these skills with every patient. What would your immediate response?
I'd be apprehensive. I wouldn't want to, I would hope that I got it all in my head and I didn't make any mistakes. And then I'd probably be like, I wonder if I can get out of this.
Exactly. Because you just got told you were going to have to do this. What if you already have some good skills? I haven't. So let's say I just told you that you would have some kickback, that whole wrestling boxing match versus, we're going to be a partner in something. And they were doing some things I've mentioned before. They're just like, it takes so much energy and I'm over it. I'm exhausted, all these kinds of things. And so, one of the way I ask questions with them is I said, what concerns do you have about learning MI skills? I asked all of you that a little bit at the beginning, and you said it wasn't so much hesitancy, and then you had some others. But specifically, I'm talking mostly about public health providers and a few directors of facilities. And so they gave all their I'm exhausted, I'm over it, I'm tired of talking about it. And so I said, would it be okay if I shared with you a little bit more about how using MI skills might make your job actually easier rather than harder? And I'm asking permission. See, I said provide PE. PE is eliciting the question, information, and then providing some information. But I put permission with an extra P there because I feel like if you ask permission first, would it be okay if I shared this information with you? If they say no, again, you can say thanks for the boundary. Okay. And a couple people did say, I would, if it could make my life easier, I'd love to hear about it. So then I might offer some things. And so one of the things I suggested to them is, 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 tops. I know that seems like a long time when you're so swamped. However, what if you made more progress? What if more people got vaccinated? What if in learning not to take it personally, you didn't leave so frustrated at the end of the day? Because yes, this takes energy. If you're doing the push pull, I'm going to persuade you because I'm right and I've got the information. That's exhausting. It's less exhausting to take the burden off yourself and say, if they give me a hard no, I can let it go and move on. I got to move on and tap out. So, and then you can always follow up with, so I've mentioned a few ways that this might make your job easier. And I didn't list them all in the interest of time, but I could say, so what do you think about that? What do you think about what I'm talking about? And they might still have resistance. And we have that conversation first before I went on, because they were just getting straight out, conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff. So a little more on listening, and then we may go back to the other conversation. I preach this in every communication class I talk to. How many of you, when you're listening to someone else, and you don't have to fess up if you don't want to, start to answer before they're even done? If not in your head, yeah. And Tiffany's like, yeah, been there. We all do it, particularly with people we know well, or if we think we know the answer and we don't even let them finish. So listening to learn what they are saying, like it or not, learn about them. Truly hear their concerns, regardless of the accuracy that they have or the viewpoint that they hold. And boy, that's been hard in the cultural and political climates we've been living in. Absorb what's being said without taking it personally. And here's my Julie's tips. When I'm working with any kind of client, whether it's not in a provider-patient client necessarily, but it could be when I'm doing mediation or when I'm facilitating a large group who's doing a strategic plan and they've got differing viewpoints, I like to give a couple metaphors. The first one is data. Take the information, if you're a data person, this might resonate with you, that the information they give you is data. It neither has value or judgment all by itself. So if they give you information you don't like, take it as data that you can process. And don't try not to attach a judgment to it. You haven't done a full research study, you're just getting some data. The other way is when people are trying to talk to someone else or hear, but especially when you're trying to talk, and this could, the data metaphor would apply as well. When you're trying to give someone else information or explain something, do it like you're describing the weather, if that resonates with you. It was really sunny outside. It started pouring a little while ago. And now I'm thinking, you're asking for an umbrella. Okay, so you could take that and just give the information as if you are describing the weather or describing the data. I don't mean without feeling like monotone, but without a lot of intensity or heat to the words. And the other thing is if you're starting to get really annoyed, really upset, there is nothing wrong with tapping out and asking someone else to handle the situation. And I did that a couple of times answering phones. Or I don't know if you've ever done this if you have kids, but you tap out with your co-parent and say, I'm exhausted. Anything that's going to come out of my mouth is not going to be good. Your turn. So those are some of the ways to not take it personally. How are we doing on time, Emily? Let's see.
Got 15 minutes.
All right, I'm going to take a quick peek. Oh yeah, I think I do. Let's do the first few minutes of that COVID video. And we might just do 5. It's not going to do everything, but it'll.
Okay.
Would that be all right? And then because I'm towards my last slides. Yeah, this is it. Now, this is it. If you all decide you want this link later on, it'll be in the slides and everything. This is actually a really good conversation. Not everything's perfect. He doesn't do everything right, but let's just watch about 5 minutes of it. I wasn't sure if
Well, Ms. Jones, sounds like what we're going to do is we're going to just adjust the doses of your medicines for your blood pressure. Hopefully that'll keep things in check. It's great seeing you, and I'll see you very soon. We'll have you come back in like a month or so. Is that okay?
It is. It is. So,
Oh, I forgot to ask you. How's your mom?
oh, mom is she's okay. She's okay. I don't know if she told you during her last visit that we lost my aunt, her sister, due to COVID, and so it's been a really hard time for her. But outside of that, she's okay. I know she misses her sister so much because they talk like every day, especially during this time of pandemic. So, right now she's okay. Health-wise, she's okay. She's taking her medication. Just really missing her sister.
Yeah. She feels isolated.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah.
She does.
Well, thank God she has you.
Yeah. I try to do the best I can. I love my mom.
Yeah. But I said this to her, and I'm going to say it to you. I'm so sorry for your loss. It's, this virus has really ravaged the community, So, well, at least some good news is I think your mom's coming in 2 weeks, and we will have the vaccine by then, so we can give that to her, and we can also give it to you when you come in a month. Because you have diabetes, so you'd actually fall into the category of getting the vaccine. All right.
Okay. Well, listen. I can definitely talk to my mom about it, and she can definitely follow up with you if she has any other questions. But I don't think I will be taking the vaccine.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. You're not interested, huh?
I'm interested in my mom if that's going to keep her healthy, especially with this, with the passing of her sister. I'm sure she will, want to do whatever she needs to do to make sure that she's protected against COVID. To be really honest with you, Dr. Burns, I'm just really unsure. It just feels new. It's, I don't know. I've done a little bit of research, and I don't know. To be honest, I'm just really not trusting. I don't know how else to do it. You know what I mean? I'm just really not trusting. You can barely get me in for the flu shot. So this whole COVID-19.
I don't think I got you in this time, if I
Yeah,
remember
you
correctly.
You didn't. You didn't get me.
That's right. That's right. No, it's true. Okay. I didn't know that that you had that perspective. I have a few minutes. Is it okay if we talk a little bit more about the COVID vaccine? And I
Yeah.
just kind of want to explore your perspective about it.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you were mentioning that you're not sure about it, and you also mentioned that you're not trusting. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, since they've been talking about this vaccine, like I get it. I see how COVID has definitely the impact of COVID on the entire population. And then I also, like I said earlier, my aunt passed from it, and I know other folks from the community. And while I want to be healthy, right, and I want to guard myself against contracting COVID-19, the vaccine, it just feels so new. Even with the research that I've done, I don't know. I'm just really not trusting. Like, I mean, I think it's almost the same way that I feel about the flu shot. I'm one of those. It's like, well, if everybody else is vaccinated, then I should be okay. What's the impact? Like, what is the long-term impact of this vaccine? Like, I don't think we have enough information yet. That's where I am.
You're feeling some distrust about the information that's out there about the vaccine. It's new. There's a lot of unknowns that we in medicine don't have answers for.
Yes.
And so that's why you're hesitant.
And the medical profession hasn't really been nice to people who look like me.
It's true.
To be honest with you.
Yeah.
When I think about, while doctors have made great strides in medicine, a lot of it was on the bodies of Black and brown people. So I don't know. I'm just not trusting.
Yeah. I wonder if you've been on the personal end of discrimination and bias in medicine.
Is that a good place to stop there?
Yep, that's a perfect spot.
Hopefully you have the option to reshare. Let me know if not.
Yes, now I have the option. I don't know why. I'll stop expressing shock. I don't know why. Okay, so before we get to this piece, let me just ask you, there's some things he did well, there's some things he could improve. Let's think about ORS though. Did you hear any open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, summaries? I see a couple nods. Anybody want to either type one into the chat or unmute?
Well, I noticed still a lot of information of putting together the O's, the A's, the R's, and the S's.
I know. So just say you don't have to memorize it all.
What I noticed is I liked how he used, like, it seemed like his sense of humor and his relaxed. For me as a person, I like interacting with that seemed better. And then I liked that he, I was waiting for him to do it and he did it. He was like, well, I have a few minutes. Can we kind of explore that topic and kind of get to the bottom of it? And even in the end, it didn't seem like he was, gonna give out to her yards because she had some ideas that maybe weren't correct. But the other thing that sticks with me is I think it goes back to that statement or that piece in the beginning about sometimes there's just stuff I don't understand or I don't know about. Right. Like I hear that there's discrimination in the medical field, but I've been here in Ravalli County my whole life, and I suspect that there might be, but I don't know anything about it. So it's like it's not something I can connect to. And so those are the things I find that make me go, oh, maybe I need to do some research or something.
You've never been in her shoes. So the best way to find out is to ask her. Yeah. And, he asked, have you ever been, and, we might've heard an answer. This video is about 20 minutes long total, maybe only 15. And because it's in the link, it's worth watching. Anybody else want to point out what he did a good job of? Okay. What could he do better?
I didn't think his flow was the best.
Okay. Okay. And so I think, I don't know, but it has an upside and a downside. He seemed surprised at her answer. And so part of me was thinking he was being judgy for like, oh, well, you don't want to get one. But then I was like, maybe he just truly was surprised and had to kind of then cope with where he was without doing it too much. So I kind of see, you know, nobody's a perfect human being. So I don't think he intended that to be judgy, but I've had people say, well, it sounds like he was really judging her, you know, so I don't know.
I always think it's interesting, and maybe it's in like the full clip, they talk about it, but that she's lost an aunt due to COVID. And
Right.
so she's already experienced a death to this, you know, virus. But then she makes a comment, I think, of where she's at least, you know, healthier than her mother, but she's also getting meds for her like blood pressure problem in this same video. So she's obviously doesn't, and she has diabetes, I think he says, or something like that.
Ambivalence.
Yeah, so you're like, but you're not super, super healthy and you've witnessed a death. So I'm still surprised that she's as resistant as she is.
Well, I don't know if I can speak for all of you out there, but there are people who have lost someone, a significant other, and still won't go get a vaccine. And so she does talk a little bit about that later, a little bit. It's perplexing to us. That's a really good example, is to think, wow, you know, they've done all these other things and they've lost someone. But what I will tell you, and then we'll get to the wrap up phase, is that he explores her knowledge of risk factors with diabetes. He also ends up talking a little bit about the relationship of being able to visit her mom. And he doesn't go that direct. He's pretty easygoing about it. And she kind of I don't know what she ever ends up doing about the vaccination because we don't see the whole thing. It's just that she starts acknowledging that if her mom's going to get it and she thinks her mom needs to get it and she doesn't want to expose her mom and they're real close, now the dilemma's a little closer. And so he explores that with some open-ended questions. And I thought he did a fair number of affirmations through humor, a couple of those things. So there are some things she could improve. But yes, it does seem, Emily, what you said is what anybody who's had to work with COVID issues, you know, in conversations, that it's just hard. And think about that in a personal conversation. And all of you who are in small communities, people will have that conversation with you in the grocery store if you let them. I've just found that I try not to take the bait and say, hey, I barely can talk about it all at work. I want to do when I'm not at work. And sometimes I just do that to set my own boundaries, but it is perplexing. So a couple reminders: compassion, reflection, practice, not perfection. Maybe just try one new strategy. If you get a flat out no, move on. It's not on you. 2 or 3 minutes might lead to change. It might increase your comfort and effectiveness at your job. You're developing your personal style. And did I mention listening? I'm going to say that over and over again. If you're asking questions, or even if you do an affirmation and they have something to say, that you take the time to actually hear it, hear those concerns. So I put up a final thought that I think summarizes some things about what we've been talking about. And this comes from 17th century French philosopher Pascal, and he wrote this in his Pensées text. And he said, people are generally better persuaded by reasons which they themselves discovered than by those which have come into the mind of others. And I think that really summarizes MI and the approach to that. So I'm going to go back to a couple of things. I'm sure there's a faster way to do this, or much smoother. I'm going to do it the way I know will get me there quickly. And that was on my definition. So to review a few things, we've talked about collaboration, that it's goal-oriented, that it's about communication, that it's about listening for morsels in the language of change, individual motivation, movement toward a specific goal, and what that last philosopher quote was about their own arguments for change. Engaging clients to make positive changes. Client-centered, many of you mentioned that. It's a guiding method to elicit and strengthen intrinsic, which is internal, motivation for change by exploring, and we heard that, except in the first conversation Emily and I had, and I was kind of a jerk provider, and helping them resolve their ambivalence. So I think that reviews a lot of the topics we've come up with, and that it addresses some of the things you all mentioned at the beginning as to why you signed up for this. It won't have covered everything. I mean, even in 2 hours, we can't cover it all. I told Emily, I think I wrote a 6-hour seminar and then tried to put it in 2 hours. So the 3-step process was assessing their position, using MI to converse and explore, and then making a plan. And the plan might mean you have to let them go. And it also might be to help hook them up with care, or always leave the door open. If they've said a hard no, you can say, you know, I'm going to give you my business card if you'd like. You don't have to take it. Would you like to take one? So that if you decide you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me at a later date. And then I just reviewed the definitions. Before Emily talks about the evaluation, I would like to just give a couple special thanks. Emmy Spetnagel is somebody who works at the Patient Navigator Training Collaborative in Colorado. She put on a presentation that got Susan Reeser at the immunization program interested in something. And then Susan and I sat down and put together a presentation, just a 1-hour presentation related to COVID. And so I've stolen a few things from them, and I've tried to cite others as I've gone along. And then big thanks to Emily for being my tech person, rescuing me, and moral support. So super big thanks. She's great if you ever need her for that kind of stuff. So Emily, why don't you go ahead and wrap up with what you've got about evaluations?
Thanks so much, all. Thank you, Julie. I put in the chat box a link to our survey. It's a quick evaluation survey. We really appreciate the feedback so we can keep offering awesome trainings. Thank you so much for coming. This was a whirlwind training with these 2 hours. I hope you got a lot out of it, or some refresher from it. I certainly always learn something new every time. So thank you so much. I will send out a link to the recording that you can share with those that might benefit, and along with the slides as well. And then keep an eye out. We will have another completely COVID specific motivational interviewing training in June as well. So thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Emily.
Enjoy lunch. Lunch would be next.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.